So, Chapter 1, Introduction to Web Development. Load a web page into a web browser. View the source code for a web page in a web browser. Discuss the components of a web application. Describe HTTP requests and responses. Distinguish between the way a web server processes static web pages and dynamic web pages. Explain the purpose, use of HTML. Explain the purpose and use of CSS. Explain the purpose and use of JavaScript. Discuss how you deploy a website to the internet. Describe the components of an HTTP URL. Discuss these 5 web development issues: usability, cross-browser compatibility, accessibility, search engine optimization, and responsive web designs. The class really focuses on this responsive web design stuff. That way, when you look at it on your big monitor or your little phone, it will pretty much look the same. There's some steps you'll take. It won't look exactly the same because of size, but it should all work the same as you go through it. So the components of a web application: you have desktop computers, tablets, smartphones. They all go into the internet. The internet goes out, hits a web server. The web server holds all your pages and everything that you want for your website and gets your stuff back. Architecture of internet: you got LANs, local area networks, wide area networks. Not sure what the IXP stands for. Let's take a look real quick and see what an IXP is. IXP. Internet Exchange Port, physical location where internet infrastructure companies connect with each other to exchange internet traffic. So just a way to hook some stuff up. So that's kind of the architecture of the internet. You got local area networks, wide area networks. Local area networks are usually inside an office building or some kind of small area. Then they expand out to the wide area networks, and those internet exchanges transfer everything through it. Static web page. Here's a picture of one. A static web page, usually it doesn't have a whole lot of interactions with it. It will take you to a page or two or more. Very basic stuff. Not a whole lot of server-side interactions with it, so it won't do a whole lot. It's just more for informational kind of things. That's kind of what we're going to be setting up for the charity lady for the midterm. How a web server processes a static web page. Client, that's your web browser, the computer you're working on or whatever it is. You send an HTTP request. It goes out to a web server. The web server can be either on-site, in the cloud, with a hosting service. Most hosting services, I think, are putting them on clouds now. Get the HTML file. That HTML file comes back to the web server. It does its magic, makes it look like a web page, and then you can see it on your browser. A dynamic web page in Amazon, you got your search engines or search boxes, all that kind of stuff, a lot more interactive. That one goes out more often than not, hits a web page, brings some stuff back. There is some dynamic stuff you can do with JavaScript. We do a little bit of it maybe, but not a whole lot with it. When you get to Mr. OG's class next semester, then you'll be going crazy with the dynamic web pages and going out and doing all the real stuff out there. How a web server processes a dynamic web page. So you have your HTTP request just like we had. It goes out to a web server, then to an application server. Now most days your web server and application servers are both the same thing. They don't usually break them up much anymore. I think most of the time it's all put on the same server. And then of course you go out to a database server. They like to separate them in case one breaks. It doesn't destroy everything. So if your web server goes down or whatever, your database server is still safe. That's the big thing, because that's where all your data is stored and being used from, is that database server. Goes out there, gets what it needs, comes back to the application server. That application server a lot of times is your middle tier, the C# we just worked on. So when you get to Mr. OG's, that application server is going to be converting all that database info into something more legible for the web server to transmit back. Comes back with the response with their HTML, and then you see it on page just like you would if you're shopping at Amazon or anywhere else. That's kind of what's going on with all that stuff. How does the internet work? Internet infrastructure as fast as possible. You can go click on these links if you want to take a look at them, or go load them and see how it works. Web browser, current market share. Chrome, of course, is the top one. Safari, I believe, is the iPhone's.
Yeah, Apple.
Yeah, Apple's browser. I don't use many Apple products, so I'm not too familiar with that one. Internet Explorer and Edge, I think IE is pretty much depreciated. They don't do much with it anymore. It's more Edge now is what Microsoft is using for their browsers. Firefox used to be what they called Mozilla.
Yeah.
Back when I first started, that was like one of the first ones. They had Netscape. I don't know if you've ever heard of Netscape. Let's see. That was Mozilla's first Netscape browser. Let's see what they have for it.
Let's go.
Yeah, Netscape Navigator is what it used to be called.
We love Opera, especially since it's not from the US.
Yeah.
And it also gives you free ad blockers, so it doesn't have, and you don't have to deal with Google Ads.
Yeah. So Netscape was by Mozilla, and IE ran it out of business for the most part. It used to be the first browser that everybody used, and then IE came along, kind of ran Netscape out of business. I think Netscape and Mozilla. Netscape Mozilla history. And it was like pretty bare bone browser. It wasn't anything too exciting. IE ran them out of business. They came back as Firefox now. So if you use Firefox at all, I think I got it somewhere on this computer. Maybe not. Oh yeah. So Firefox.
Oh yeah, Opera's in Norwegian.
Yeah.
We love it.
So Firefox now is Mozilla's new browser to try and keep up with the times and stuff like that. A lot more people are starting to use Firefox now, trying to get away from Microsoft products and Google stuff. So you'll see that occasionally out there. And go find my PowerPoint slide again. And then Opera, like Carter was saying, Norwegian company. I'm not even sure what platform that runs on off the top of my head.
I'm looking for it right now.
All right, let's.
I mean, I'm currently on it, so what I use.
You use Opera?
Yeah. Specifically the GX1 because it allows me to keep open YouTube stuff.
Yeah.
Just
Faster, safer, and smarter than default browsers. Fully featured for privacy, security, and so much more.
also free VPN and ad blocker. So
Yeah, Opera is a web browser and internet suite developed by Opera Software. The browser handles common internet-related tasks such as displaying websites, blah, 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 blah. Started out as a research project at Telenor, the largest Norwegian telecommunications company. In 1994, available for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Opera Mini is for Android. Opera uses the Blink rendering engine, so the web standard support should be similar to Google Chrome. So, I might have to check more into that. It sounds interesting. If I'm trying to get away from Google stuff.
yeah, they also have a really they have Opera GX and it has a quite a funny Twitter account.
Oh yeah.
It's equivalent to the Wendy's one, where but they're much more active, so it's way fun. Man.
So web browser usage over time. You can see green is Chrome. You can see how popular that is by far. The gray one down here is Safari, with Apple stuff getting more and more popular. That's moving up. You can see IE was there and it's dropped way down. I don't use Edge very often myself.
I don't like using it.
Yeah. Firefox, that's starting to pick up a little more in popularity. So you can see Chrome's still the big leader in all the browsers. Server-side programming languages, what they mean by server-side is usually on the hosting side, not client-side. Client-side is your local machine kind of thing. That's where your HTML and most of that is. The server-side programming languages, you got JavaScript, HTML, CSS, SQL, Python, Java, Bash, Shell, PowerShell, C#, TypeScript, PHP, C++, C, Go, Ruby. So we've been using, you'll use JavaScript, C#. You've used both of those. Those are both server-side. We'll be doing JavaScript. You'll be learning that. They have server-side and client-side for JavaScript. And then HTML, CSS. You've used a little bit of SQL stuff now. I had you bring that one Git when we were trying to clone your repository, Dominic, and we used that Git. That was Git Bash. We used Bash as what you actually used for that. So you got to see that. And actually, where is it? Git Bash. So this is Git Bash here. It's Bash. Use it for scripting stuff. This is Git, so like instead of GitHub Desktop or using Git out of your Visual Studio, you can use this instead. And you type in the keyword Git, and then it'll do your Git commands for you and stuff like that. We don't go too much into this. This can get pretty complicated. There is a GUI version that you can use. Makes it a little bit easier to figure out what's going on. You can see I got a file out here that needs to be uploaded. Here you put your commit message in, here you commit it and push it out, kind of like you do on GitHub Desktop. GitHub Desktop's a little bit more clean than this, but that's what that is if you ever see it. So server-side programming languages, like I said, JavaScript, Python, Java, or C# is Microsoft's version of Java is what that was. So like I said, in the C# class, if you get comfortable and familiar with that, you should be able to move to Java fairly well in your career. Ruby is a framework, I believe, that's starting to get a little more popular. If you go out and look for jobs, you'll see some Ruby on Rails stuff is what it's called. And web page with image swaps and rollovers, we'll be doing that stuff with JavaScript. So if you roll over one of these boxes down here, the shirt will change colors and style. Roll over the colors here, the shirt will change colors. Same with that. We'll be doing that in this class with JavaScript, and CSS is doing some image swaps and rollovers. How JavaScript fits into this architecture. Again, you have your client, your web browser, you make your HTTP request, it goes out to the HTML files. Usually you have a link to JavaScript files or JavaScript embedded in the HTML code, and it reads that code and does what it needs to do, and then it just comes back as your HTTP response with HTML and JavaScript. Common uses of JavaScript, some interactivity, data validation, image swaps and rollovers, accordions. The accordions are just like drop-down menu kind of things. And then what they call AJAX is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. I've only used that like one time in a job, and that was when I was working for Department of Defense. It helps make request calls to the backside and that to pass the data through. It's pretty nice. It was easy to set up and pretty easy to work with. So if you ever get a chance to check out AJAX stuff, I would recommend just kind of briefly looking through. I'm not sure how popular it still is nowadays. We used it with jQuery at the time. So here's your code for an HTML file. Your HTML will always start with this doc type telling it it's going to be an HTML file. Then you say HTML, the language is English, so it's EN. I think you can put like FR for French up there. You can put some different ones up there. We played with it a little bit last semester, and sometimes it affected your code, sometimes it didn't. It's supposed to change it to that language set. So if you put it in French, it's supposed to make it look French or read in French kind of a stuff. But the meta char set UTF-8 is just telling it what style to use. And then you have a title up in your head. The title is what you actually see show up in your web page. So let me find a web page. So like ESPN, you can see up here, that's the title. If we go view the page source, somewhere it should have a title in here. There's your doc type where it starts. Here's your HTML saying the language is English. Here's your char set, UTF-8. Here's our title. It says ESPN serving sports fans anytime, anywhere. We go look at our title here, and it says serving sports fans anytime, anywhere. So that's when you put that title in, that's where you're going to see it, is in the tab that the people open up to look at your web page. You have a little favicon here. This little E will work on favicons. Sometimes it's a pain in the butt to get them working and using right, but we'll try and see if we can't do it for your web pages and stuff like that.
Why is that?
It's just, I don't know. It's just the way it's done, because you have to go out to a website and create them off a website and then use that link to kind of put them in to get them working. So
You have to use a website that has a favicon to get a favicon.
a favicon generator, we'll say, to generate your favicon, to give you the code to link to it. Yeah, so it gets to be some fun stuff. When you
is that kind of like when you like open image in separate tab and it like brings up the entire thing, like it's its own website technically that it uses?
Yeah, what it does, it puts a link to that generator page to pull your image from it, kind of a thing. When we get into images and you see how images work, you have to have a path to find the image on your computer or wherever you're getting it from. And so that's kind of what it's doing there. And so then we have a head tag here, this head. We put certain things in between these head tags to get them to work and render properly. You have a body tag here, this body, where it's body here and here. The body with the angle brackets here, just the angle brackets. That's what they call an opening tag. You have to have an opening tag most of the time and a closing tag. When you have the slash in front of the name here, so it's body, you're opening a body tag here with just the angle brackets. You're closing it here by putting that slash in front of it. So almost always you have to have an opening tag and a closing tag to show this is all I want to run in this part. That's all I want for this H1. Makes it a heading, which makes it big text on the screen. That opens it, that closes it. Got a paragraph here, that way it puts it in like a little section of its own called a block. You got an opening paragraph, a closing paragraph, an opening paragraph, a closing paragraph. This A is an anchor tag. That's what creates your links that you see, the blue links or whatever color they happen to be. This A creates them. This href tells what link to go to, and that A closes it. So that's the only part. If you don't close this A here, everything after that will be looking like a hyperlink. When you go click it to go to the page you want, it won't work because that's not the exact path or file that you want to open it.
I got a question. What about the IMG? I'm going to send an image.
Yeah, the IMG is an image tag, and this is kind of what I was telling you a second ago, Carter, is you have an image is an image tag, and then you have a source as a attribute, and the source tells you where to go get the image from on your computer. So if it's local, most of the time you'll create an image folder and go pull it out of an image folder. You can go copy links to images off the website, kind of what we were just talking about, that favicon.
Yeah.
It just copies the link to it and you put it in there and it shows up. But we'll get more into these tags as we go, but for the most part, you want anything you want to see on your page, you want to stick in this body tag. You can put stuff outside of it. It's not recommended. That's not the proper way to go with setting up HTML. You run it through a validator and it should flag it. I know sometimes it doesn't for some reason, the way things are changing in HTML now. When I did HTML 24, 25 years ago, they had certain tags and it had to follow a certain way. Now you can call things whatever you want to in these tags. As we get more into it, we'll talk about that too. There's a certain name for it. But now you could call, like, you do P stands for paragraph. If you wanted to, you could type out paragraph now and it'd still work. In the old days, it would throw an error because it wasn't one of the standard element tags that you use.
Yeah.
So,
I
and
mean,
then,
I'd just make it para to make it easier to.
yeah, and
Instead of like.
And actually, P is about as easy you can get for a paragraph. When you code HTML a lot, you'll see P all the time and understand it's a paragraph tag.
I'm guessing there's not many, like the A and the P don't have any other meanings.
No. A is for anchor, P is for paragraph. H1 is a heading
Yeah.
with the size of 1. You have headings 1 through 6 is what they have for heading sizes. Usually on a page you only want to have one H1 because it's the biggest part of text that draws the most attention. After that you use like H2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It makes it smaller but bolder so you can still see.
So it's saying H6 is like smaller and H1 is like the biggest?
Yeah, H1 is the biggest, H6 is the smallest. They're both highlighted, like bolded so you can see them and they stick out more in that. But like I said, when we get Chapter 2 and start digging through in this a little bit more, we'll get more in depth on these tags and the elements and stuff like that and what they do.
Does it use the same like headings as what is it, the ones that they have on PowerPoint and Word, or?
Same headings like what's in here now.
No, I meant like because they have like in PowerPoint and Word they both have like the heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, heading 4, heading 5.
I don't know if they actually match up like that because like
I was just
PowerPoint,
wondering.
yeah, PowerPoint's Microsoft thing and the
I don't know if Microsoft just decided, hey, we're just gonna.
yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'd have to go look. And that's an interesting question. I'll check on that to see. Here's the code that we just looked at here. The HTML code is displayed as a web page right here. So you can see this is our H1 here, this JavaScript jQuery 3rd edition. You can see our H1 is JavaScript jQuery 3rd edition. You can see how big it is and how bold it is. Here's our paragraph down here. Here's another paragraph down there. Here's that hyperlink that we looked at, that anchor tag. Ahref, read more. We look down here and that read more is highlighted like an anchor tag or a link. Use CSS to change how the page looks. HTML used to create the structure of the page. Cascading style sheets, CSS, is used to change the look of a web page. So that's what I was saying, that HTML is like the backbone, the body of it, the structure of a web page. Cascading style sheets is the beauty, the looks of it kind of a thing. And then when you add JavaScript into it, JavaScript is like the brains behind it. So then you create like a whole object, I guess, you kind of a thing with the body, the looks, and the brains kind of a thing.
I got a question. What we like work on like a security part of CSS and HTML?
We're not going to work on that part of it.
I feel like when back when I was in high school, I would use this thing called MP3, like download MP3 files onto my phone.
Yep.
And so when I did it, it would kind of like pop up like random links, so they kind of try to close it out. But I know she got to work where you download the MP3 file. But I wonder is there a way to kind of like add like a security method where they can like I don't know, like kind of stop that whatever it is. I'm not sure how.
I don't think that's being secure? I think that's the little downloader doing that.
Yeah, that would be whatever app you're using to download it through.
Hello.
What's up?
Not much. Hey, is Duke here? We trying to find.
He went out to Wentzville.
Oh, you went out to Wentzville today?
Yeah.
Okay. That would explain why I can't find him.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
Keith is out there, so he's
Oh.
checking on Keith, and then the new guy. It's his second day, so he's making sure everything's good with him and that. So.
Okay, I gotcha.
All right.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, no problem.
Talk to you later.
All right. So yeah, whatever you're downloading, like however you're bringing that into your page, the software or wherever probably has something to do with that. The security part on the web is like a normal page. It's called HTTP. If you're typing in a web page, so if you're out in a browser here and you type in like HTTP, and you can see here it has the S on it. That S means it's secure. That's what gets you a secure site nowadays. If you just put HTTP, it's not secure. Your information can be taken off of it a lot easier and stuff like that. The S shows that it's a secure site. And let's tab. Oh, this will bring out Google Docs.
Because I would see like list of like I would see a list of stuff, and I would be like, why is there an S and why is there not?
Yeah, the S means it's secure. So when you see that S, you know it's a fairly secure site. It's fairly safe to pass your data back and forth through it.
I feel like Google Chrome probably has shown me a little thing where it was kind of giving me a warning saying like, yo, this browser's not secure, dude.
Yes, you will get that occasionally. Chrome will say that too, that it's not a secure site.
Opera says that. Yeah.
Yeah, be aware of it. They used to have a little lock. You'd see a little lock.
Oh, you still do.
Do you see some? Like this one's not showing it, but yeah, you used to see a little padlock on this right-hand side to show that it was a secure site kind of a thing. And I was trying to find one. Let's see.
It's like 114.
Secure website padlock. Let's see. HTTPS and a padlock does not mean a website is secure. It usually does, though, more often than not. I'm sure hackers have done something to make it a little bit less secure, but for the most part,
The left side now, I don't remember.
yeah, it used to be on
Yeah,
the.
it's on the left. It's if you click the little thing right above the Google.
Right there.
It should, yeah.
Yeah, connection is secure. So yeah, they kind of hide it in the background now. It used to show up right here on the right-hand side all the time. That
I think it's when like you open something new. Or
Yeah.
It's usually if it's a page that you don't go too often, it'll show up initially.
So here it says the lock symbol and related URL containing HTTPS simply means that the connection between your web browser and the website server is encrypted and safe. So when you see that, you can feel a little more secure as you're doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah, on Opera, it shows it immediately. The thing right to, instead of being on the right, it's immediately to the left, right next to it.
Yeah.
So anything with
Yeah, and actually right here on the Microsoft on the edge, you can see
yeah,
the
that's
little
where it
lock
is
right
now.
there.
I do see that.
So let's see.
I do remember them putting it there because
Yep.
that's where the permissions and
Yeah.
like, all the site settings are.
Connection is secure, tracking prevention for the site.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that little lock and the HTTPS usually means it's secure, that it's a fairly safe site. So CSS, you use this link element to add CSS file. So you say link, the relationship to it is a style sheet, and this href says where's it at, and the file is called book CSS, so it goes out and looks for that file, and then it will add that style to it. This is an external style sheet is what this is. We'll also have embedded style sheets where you can write the code in the head file here and call it out of there, and there's also inline styles where you put it right into your HTML element tag and it will pick it up out of there. They're trying to get away from that, the inline style, so as we validate some of these web pages we're going to create, It'll more than likely throw an error because of that. And if I see it, I'm not going to worry too much about it, but I know they are trying to move away from those inline styles. But sometimes you have to use that inline style to force it to do what you want to at times. So the code for a CSS file named book. So here you have your attribute, which is the body, and then you have your element, the body. You have your attribute called the font family, and then your properties, the type of font families you want to use. You got your font size. They're saying use 100% font size. Make the width of the body 550 pixels. You can put margins and padding on it to get your stuff centered properly. You can put a border around it, make it 1 pic solid navy. Oops. H1, we looked at that H1 already, that heading 1. So you can make your font size 200%. You can make the color navy. Most of the time with your headings, you don't want to mess with the font size because they already have a preset font size for you. But you can change the colors of it if you want to. We'll end up putting shadows behind it, so it makes the text look like it's sitting off the page a little bit with shadows behind it and stuff like that. Image, you got a float left, you got the margins. Float is another element or a property or an attribute, technically. An attribute that they're trying to get away from is float. With Bootstrap and React, you can actually place it a little bit more than using this float, so they're trying to get away from it. And then again, the paragraph, that little P that we saw earlier, paragraph, they have a margin of 0 and then the padding at the bottom of it at 0.5. EM is just a type of measurement. We'll cover a little bit more on that as we get through it. So you have pixels, which is PX. You have EMs, which is an old type of measurement from printing newspapers and books and stuff like that. The percent is just relative to the size of the page. And like I said, as we get through it, we'll talk more about the different sizing and all this stuff here. This is how it shows up. So it went from looking like this with no styling to it to looking like that by adding the style sheet to it. So that's why I said the style sheet is the beauty behind it, makes it look good. The HTML is the framework, the structure, the body of it. CSS is the beauty to it. Websites to become familiar with is the Mozilla Developer Network. Introduction to HTML. You can go copy these links and go out and take a look at them after here if you want to. CSS first steps. Free text editors. There's the Visual Studio Code that we'll be using. You can also just do it out of a text editor like Notepad++ or even Notepad, as basic as Notepad is.
We love Notepad. Notepad is great.
Yeah, so Notepad, you would just type it up like a normal file. So you do like.
Fun fact, that's how a lot of the indie developers that don't use Steam and whatever.
When I first started developing, this is what I developed on Notepad. I would
Yeah.
just type all my code out by hand in Notepad, and then you save it as an HTML or an HTML file, go load it in a browser, and it'll work just like a web page. I'll show you more of that as we get into it and stuff.
The ones that allow it to work without using the web page and just instantly pop up.
Yeah, and
The
now
application, whatever ones.
now they got all these fancy editors and stuff like Visual Studio Code. I used to use one. God, I used it for a long. Edit Plus is what it was called. I used that for a long time. It was free forever, and then they started making you pay for it. Popular IDEs for web development. Here's Visual Studio Code, Microsoft Visual Studio, which we used in our C# class. This IntelliJ is becoming very popular. They also have Eclipse. Eclipse is, you can see down here in this picture, Eclipse. That's a lot of, we used it mostly for Java development, but it does a lot of HTML stuff too. So if you ever get tired of using Visual Studio Code, I would go look at Eclipse or IntelliJ. Eclipse is free. IntelliJ, you may have to pay for it, but those are some of the more popular IDEs that are being used in the business world nowadays. Some popular FTP programs: FileZilla, WinSCP, CyberDuck. I don't think I've used any of these. It's been a long time since I've actually used. FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. What that does is takes your files, pushes them out to a hosting site or a web server, and then that reads it, loads it, gets it ready to run. You can see a little image down here. It's hard to tell though, but
Oh, is that like when you take it from the notepad and then put it onto a website?
yeah. So that it takes that file, which is the F in file transfer. So it takes that file, transfers it, follows the protocols, and then puts it onto a web server.
There's a funny one. What is it? I think it's called save edit online for all the games that I play that use Notepad as their coding.
Oh, yeah.
thing.
So like one I used for a long time, if this image ever comes
It
up.
allows me to edit the code without having to, because some game developers have found a way to hide the Notepad, not allowing you to change it.
So like one I used for a long time was something like this, and it has your local one over here, your local computer here. You go find the files you want, you click them, and it brings it over to here, and then you push a button up here that transfers them over for you and stuff like that. Nowadays, most of the hosting sites have their own that they have kind of incorporated into it. I know GoDaddy does. I've used GoDaddy most recently. But yeah, they're pretty basic. It just looks for the file, transfer it over to that web that's going to be used, put it in the right directory on the web, and then your web page is out there ready to go. Yeah, I was wondering if that was thunder myself. So you got FTP. They don't have it on here, but you'll see, I think it's SFTP, and that's a secure.
Yeah. Secure
Yeah,
file
SFTP means it's a secure file transfer protocol software.
software.
Back in my day, it was never worried about. I never had to use it or pay attention to it. And now, I guess with hacking getting the way it is now, you'll see more of that SFTP programs being used and stuff like that.
Yeah, because they're using, what is it? They're catching the catches or whatever. They're catching the catches that are being sent back and forth now.
Oh yeah,
And catching it before it gets onto the website.
yeah.
Not allowing it to get to the website.
So the components of a, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. The components of a simple URL is here's your protocol, which is at HTTP or HTTPS. The domain name is what you see is always at www.whatever.com, .net, .org. Oh my God, they got so many of them now. They got like .business, .shop, .io. They got all kinds of them out there now.
IO's not new. IO's
Yeah.
It's pretty.
But
What is IO? I can't remember.
input output kind of a thing. I think it's more for like programmers use that kind of one
I
than.
know it's for programming, gaming. A lot of games use it now.
But really, I mean, if you go out and buy a web domain name, I just bought one not too long ago, and the lady with the charity we're going to help, I'm trying to get her to get out and buy the one she wants. But God, they got so many different extensions to these domain names now that it doesn't matter what you use it for. If you buy it, you can use it for whatever you want to.
I just forgot about that.
Yeah, it's just, that's what it's mostly associated with. So like this .com is for commercial sites is what it is. The .org is for organizations. The .edu is for educational kind of sites and stuff like that. So it doesn't matter what you're hosting your site as. It just, you want to try and get that whatever to associate with the type of business or whatever your website is, kind of a thing. So then when you see the path here, this path, as we create these websites, you have your root directory, which holds all your HTML stuff in it and that. Well, when you get to that point, you'll have like, you'll have a folder. Let's see if I can draw a folder. Oh, that's pretty ugly. But you have your HTML stuff in here, whatever, all your HTML associated stuff in there. And then you can create another folder, and you can put images in it. And you can create another folder and put your JavaScript in it, and another folder to put your style sheets in it. And then you'll put another folder, and you can put more web pages in your other folder. Let me make this one bigger here. And so you have your main HTML page. Well, then you can go to a guest book. And inside this guest book, you'll have an HTML page in here, and you can have some CSS in it, you can have an image in it. And so when you do that, you have to use this here. So you go, this would be our guest book folder here that we're looking for. So we put our domain name in, we want this guest book folder, we want this HTML page out of our guest book folder. So this is just a folder name here is all this is. When you see it like this, just think that's a folder name. And then inside that folder, there's going to be an index.html page. So this HTML here would just be called, like on theirs is index. So it would be index.html. And so that's how that simple URL works. That's what it's doing. It's finding, this would be our work, the way that looks, and then index.html. So after that .com, when you see that slash and more going on, all these are is file names, or all of these are is folders. And then when you see the .html, .css, or whatever, that's a file that it's pulling out of there is all it's doing. And some of these URLs can have all kinds of folders that it goes through. So you could have like .com.
A folder inside of a folder.
Yeah, so yeah, folder after folder after folder, and so on, until you finally get to that index.html page that you're looking for. So you can see, if you go look through some of these, especially shopping sites and stuff like that, you'll see a lot of different paths like that that you can look through. Let's see. Let's go shopping somewhere on Amazon. This one doesn't have a lot of them, but you can see it's Amazon.com, and then they got another thing called GP is another folder. Then they got another folder called Buy Again, and then they're passing some data back through the database to go find out what it's looking for, kind of a thing. So as you go look through these sites, let's see if this one's even up still. So we'll go into like baseball. So you can see now they go into ESPN, and they got a folder called ESPN Plus, and then they got another folder called Catalog.
And they got that long name folder.
Yeah, and that's usually encrypted data here, so you can't tell what it's actually going to go look for and find. And then they get that NCAA baseball, what they have. And anytime you create a web page, you always start it with the keyword index. So like anytime your main page on your website will be index.html, or you can call it HTM, that will also work. But it's always got to be a lowercase I for index. So when you type in your path, we'll go back. So when you type in your path, this ESPN.com, what it's really doing is doing a .index.html or HTM. It should still come up. That index is the first thing that browser looks for. If you capitalize the I in the index, it won't find it. If you put home.html instead of index, then whoever uses your website is going to have to go type in espn.com/home.html. And it's just a pain to do it that way. So anytime you create a main page for your website, always use index.html with a lowercase I. That way all they have to do is type in espn.com. The browser automatically goes and looks for that index page and brings it up. So that's why we don't have to type in index.html.
I'm guessing the home is useful for like the indie game people, where like you download all the files onto your computer, and then you click the application and it runs. onto your browser. That way, like you need, what is it, the .home.html, because most people would mix that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you can have a home folder, you can have a home HTML page.
But it's just easier to do it.
Yeah, you'll have to type it in. The user will have to type it in. That's a hassle for them. You want your website as easy as possible for them to move around in. And as we dig through some of this stuff, that's going to be something we come across. So just remember HTTP or S, usually S nowadays. I think most things are becoming on the internet. // that's your protocol. The www.whatever.com, .edu, .net, .org, that's your domain name. The first thing after your slash is usually a folder, and then if it says .html, .htm, .css, .whatever, that's your file that you're actually going out and hitting. 2 ways to access a web page on the internet. Enter the URL of a web page in the browser's address bar. That URL stands for Universal Resource Locator. So if you ever hear anybody say, what's the URL? That's what they're saying is, what's the Universal Resource Locator? That's how you go locate the web page out on the internets. Click on the link in the current web page and load another web page. Everybody's familiar with these two ways. If you've been surfing the net, as long as most of you probably have, you should all be familiar with that. 3 ways to access a web page from your own server or computer. Use the features of your text editor on your IDE, and on our IDE here, let me see if I gotta open a folder or a file here.
What's the IDE again? What does it
It's
stand for?
some developer, I have to look it up. I can never remember the name of it. Integrated Development Environment. And that means it has a lot of stuff, software in there to help you run it. A lot of times there's a server and stuff like that that helps you. But you'll hear IDE a lot in software development, and for some reason I can never remember what it stands for. You'd think by now I would, but let me go Documents. I think I got some. Go to a homework page, basic homework page here. That's not what I want. Let's go to a lab. So let's do this. Select folder. So on here, on our Visual Studio Code, we have some HTML pages and stuff like that. You can click in here and you can open with Live Server. And when you open it with Live Server, it should run and bring up a web page for you. So there it did. It brought up a web page there. So that's one way you can do it in your local environment. When I say local environment, that's just your local computer that you're using. You can find the file in File Explorer or Finder, then double click on it and it'll open it. So if I go to lab here and open one of these up, I can find the web page, just click on it, and that'll open up the web page in a browser. Usually. That's another way you can do it, by doing that. And if your browser has a menu bar, use the File Open or File Open File command. I don't even know if they have them much on browsers. No, I don't really see it on here. Copy paste. But anyhow, that's another way you can do it. Most of the time you'll be opening in your IDE or through File Explorer. Naming recommendations for folders and files. Create names of folders and files that consist of lowercase letters, numbers, underscores, or hyphens, and the period. So make sure you put that all lowercase. Do not use uppercase letters in file names or directory names to avoid issues with case-sensitive file systems. And like I said, the index with it being lowercase I just got into web development or design stuff, I should say. Created my first couple web pages, and I always had it with a capital I for index, and I could not get my websites to work for the life of me. So I had a buddy, his parents owned a internet service provider company. I went there, I think I interviewed for a help desk position, maybe. Interview went great. I get to the very end of it, and it's the kid I went to school with and his mom interviewing me, and I was like, hey, I got a quick question for you. I said, I'm trying to upload a bunch of web pages to the internet. I said, I cannot get my index page to load. And I told them what I was doing, and it's like, well, you got to use a lowercase I. And I think because I asked that question at the end of the interview, I did not get the job. Yeah, so it's like, way to ask a stupid question while you're in an interview. But it did allow me to understand why my web pages weren't working, and I still went ahead and had a nice thing doing web pages on the side once I learned how to load them up on a actual hosting site.
I want to ask, is every job technically like that, or is it going to be 100% on everything?
Where what?
Get me 100% on everything. Like, is every job basically like that?
100% on everything?
Yeah.
Like your knowledge of it and that?
I mean, yeah, I mean, you're probably like 90 now. We literally at the 90% range already. So, like, do you really have to be like kind of like the top tier at 100 on every job?
No, they're not going to expect you to know everything or be able to answer every question. And as a matter of fact, one of the students that just graduated in May went on an interview, and they asked him what a join is, what a right join is, left join, and an inner join, and he did not know what an inner join was. So they're not going to expect you to know everything, especially being a junior developer just coming out of college and stuff like that. There's just so much of this. You're not going to remember everything. It's the basics and stuff that you want to get down and make sure you can talk about on your portfolio. If it's on your portfolio, you should be able to talk about it, explain what the code's doing and why it's doing it, that kind of stuff. It's, like I said before, walk the walk, talk the talk kind of a thing. If it's on your resume or whatever, you need to be able to talk about that kind of stuff. But there's times you're going to have a brain fart or whatever and not remember something. And even when I'm up here talking, I still forget the names, like the IDE. You know, I call them an IDE. I don't look and see. I don't say what the whole thing is for. And so there's stuff that you won't get everything right on an interview and that, and don't let that scare you. And like I told the student that I was talking to that went on that interview, the very first thing you do when you finish an interview and they ask you a question or two you don't understand or know, go look it up. So that way if you go for another interview, you know that next time what it means and stuff like that. So use file names that clearly indicate what a page contains. This is good for search engine optimization. So if you're making a page about dogs, don't call it elephants or something like that. It has nothing to do with what you're working on or what it has to do with. How to view source code on a web page. In Chrome, right-click in the page and select View Page Source command. In Chrome, the page source is displayed in a new browser. I think you can do that in almost any website now. So let's go look again out in our ESPN example. What you do is you just right-click anywhere on the page, and you'll see this down here where it says View Page Source. You click on that, and it shows you all the HTML, all the code that it took to make this web page.
Over 500 lines of code.
Yeah. There's a lot. Even with just HTML, it takes 1,100. What is that? 1,160 lines of code for that. 1,159 lines of code.
Oh, yeah.
But here's a JavaScript function they're running here. Another JavaScript function they're running here.
Is it page source?
Yeah, view page source. Yeah.
Don't go to GitHub. Don't go to GitHub.
yeah, that would be a mess, I'm sure, with all that in there.
Don't.
I would find a simple website if you want to practice doing this.
I love that I went to my email.
Yeah.
And it's one line of code that's just very, very. It is all just one. Instead of being multiple lines, it is just one long. It is literally just one long code. That's what it is.
But this LD JSON stuff, JSON's getting more and more popular. Here they have a link, the relationship is a preload, so before the page goes, it preloads this, it puts a font in there. Here's the font type they're using. Here's where they're going out and getting the font that they're using. And we'll use that. There's Google fonts that have, I don't know, like 5,000 different fonts you can go out and use. It's pretty cool. Here they're saying go out and use Bootstrap. We're going to learn Bootstrap. They're just saying go out and grab the Bootstrap. They're putting it in different languages. That way if you're in a different country, it can show up as a different language if need be. That way they don't have to recode this web page 45 different times for 45 different languages, kind of a thing. So you can see everything pretty much that their website does on here. Here's a link to different places on their site. Here's settings for Apple for their touch icon stuff. Here's more scripts. Load the pre-bid stuff. So when you do that view page source, you can go out and see all the code it takes to write that page, and every page will have a different kind of a view source thing behind it like that. When I got started, and you probably, if you get into this enough and keep doing it for a job, you'll be using that view page source a lot, either to copy some of their code out of it, to reuse it as your own, and that's how I got started. I would go find a web page I'd find cool, I'd view the page source, see how they did it. I would either copy the code over or rewrite it myself to get it to do what I wanted to. And so for the longest time, that's what I did to create my web pages and stuff like that. And I know some here still do look at the page source and go see what's going on with it. And I still will. If I find a cool page or something that I like out of it, I'll go look at the page source and see what's going on with it. And like I said, every website has that. Let's see if I can find here's W3 Schools. We go view page source, and again you can see telling it US language. This doc type is telling it we want this to be in HTML. Here's their title, Opera Browser. We go look here and you can see it says Opera Browser, just like the title says it's going to. Here's links to do stuff, links for style sheets, and then if you click on these style sheet links, you can actually go see their style sheets. So like if I click on that, here's their style sheet. This is how they have their style sheets set up for that one. So it's kind of neat too. If you find something style-wise that's cool, you can go click on that style sheet link and go see what they're using for style sheets. Some of them are pretty sloppy. You have to clean them up to see what you want to see, but kind of neat. Here's a font they're preloading, another font, more fonts. So view source, view page source, you can go out and see what the code is running those web pages. How to view the CSS code and external styles file. I just showed you how to do that. Go find that link and just click on the CSS link and it'll open up the style sheet and tell you the styles they're using in that. Then what you could do is once you find the style, let me go back to what I was just using, this Opera. So you go view page source, you open it up, you go click on this style, and then what you can do is you can copy like this here, go back in here, and I thought Control F was fine. You used to be able to search, you could do a Control F to find it and then go search for it in there and see how they're using it, kind of a thing. I know inspect, I could probably find it, but and then as I just did, I right clicked on here, you can just view this inspect. This is like developer tools you can use to go check out issues with your website, go find different parts of it. So I can open up this table here and go look at the stuff for the table. We'll get into that later on. So that's how you can go check out somebody's CSS code, is just go find that link, go click on it, open it up, Common web development issues, usability, cross-browser compatibility. Back in the old days, if something ran on IE, it might not work the same on Chrome. It might not work the same on Firefox or Foxfire, whatever it's called. Firefox. Now most of the browsers are working together to make everything cross-browser compatible, so you won't have as many issues. There's also code we're going to add as a default to make them all kind of standard for us. We'll get more into that later. Accessibility, search engine optimization. People want theirs always listed at the top of Google. Well, there's some things you can do to get it to get ranked higher up into the search engine results and stuff like that. And then responsive web design. If it looks a certain way on your laptop, it might not look the same way on your phone, and then there's some stuff you got to go dig through and code out to try and get that figured out and stuff like that. Website that's easy to use, overstock.com. What a website user wants is usability. They want to find what they're looking for as quickly and easily as possible. I don't know about you guys, but if I have to dig through a website to find something, I'm usually moving on from it pretty quick to go find something a little bit easier to find. Get information or do a task as quickly and easily as possible. Same thing, if I can't find what I'm looking for, if it's a pain in the butt to use, I don't even want to deal with it. How website users use a web page. They can scan the page to find what they're looking for a link to get what they're looking for. They do not like to scroll. If they get frustrated, they leave. Just exactly what I was saying. If I don't find what I'm looking for pretty quick, I'm looking somewhere else. They often click on links and buttons with the hope of finding what they're looking for. They frequently click on the back button when they don't find it. So, yeah, it gets frustrating if you're out there looking for something and can't find it. Guides for improving usability. Present as much critical information as possible above the fold. That above the fold is just kind of where the page cuts off at. Above the fold, below the fold, does it still matter in 2023? So the fold is kind of when you print a page out, what page it's on, kind of a thing. I don't even know if they still worry about above the fold. To me, the fold is the bottom of your screen is what I consider the fold, and I think that's what a lot of people still consider as the fold. So as you're browsing a web page, that bottom of the screen is the first fold on your page. If you have to scroll down, you're getting into the second fold on the page, kind of a thing. Group related items, but limit the number of items or number of groups on each page. So kind of like what we did in C# where we used those group boxes and kind of kept everything together. That's what they're saying here. Trying to group related items, but try not to put too many on one page. That way it gets kind of confusing and kind of convoluted. Include a header that identifies the site and provides a navigation bar. So usually, like if you're on a certain page, you want to have a header on that page that tells you what you're on. So if you're at the main page and you go to a sign up sheet, have the page called sign up sheet or something like that, just so it makes it easier to find. Try and keep the link in your navigation bar consistent with what you're trying to name the page and stuff like that, so it makes sense as you're flipping through these pages to look for what you're trying to find a little bit easier. Use current navigation conventions like including a logo that goes onto your home page when clicked and a cart icon that goes to your shopping cart when clicked. The logo one, we'll end up doing some of that here in our labs and homeworks and stuff like that. They'll tell you to create a logo or get a logo, click on it, make it go back to the home page, kind of a thing. Whatever is easier to get people to move around in your site, the better off you are, the more happy they'll be with it. Guidelines for cross-browser compatibility. Test your web pages on all the major browsers, including older versions of IE that are still in common use. I don't know how much of IE is still in use anymore. Maybe 11. Is that one of the last ones? Something like that. But that's what I was saying earlier, that you code it on Chrome, it may look totally different. It may shift something over on IE. It may shift something over on Opera or whatever. So you might, when you code your web pages, check them out on different browsers to make sure they're all still looking good, looking uniform, looking the same. Use the features of HTML5 and CSS3 that are supported by all modern browsers. And like I said, the times nowadays, most of these things are getting pretty what's the word, on the same page as each other, so you don't have as many cross-browser compatibility issues. Like I said, there's going to be a default we'll end up adding in our code to get them all set up as a default, kind of so it looks a little bit better. If you go look through some things like on W3 Schools that you can do, let's go look at something real quick. So I think like when you're doing some of these, they'll tell you like some of them that are what browsers they work best on, what ones they don't work on. But like I said, most of them are getting to the point where they're all uniform, so it doesn't cause many issues anymore. So every now and then as you're looking through some of these, you'll see that it'll tell you what browsers are outdated on and no longer used on and stuff like that. So you may come across some of that just to see that. And if you do, it kind of helps you with the cross-platform compatibility and stuff, cross-browser compatibility stuff. So, accessibility laws that you should be aware of: the ADA, Americans with Disabilities, Section 504 and 508 of the Federal Rehabilitation Act, Section 255 of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. I don't know what all these are for. I know one job I had, we had a code for 504 and 508, and I believe that was for either blind people or deaf people to be able to use our site. So like it will, as we code some of these and we put some of these attributes in there, some of the browsers will read the actual wording and speak them out. So like a blind person can actually use your website if you set it up right and stuff like that. Some of the deaf people or whatever, they may have certain text on the screen that they can read a little bit easier, certain color combinations that you use to make it easier for them to read and stuff like that. So some of the Americans with Disabilities, you can use like the tab key to get around in a website rather than having to type stuff in or use the mouse, that kind of stuff to make it a little bit easier for people with handicaps to use. So kind of keep that in mind as you code it out. All the jobs I had, I've only had one that needed that 508 and 504 stuff in it. And here, type of disabilities, you got visual, hearing, motor, cognitive. The Murdoch Books website on different devices, and this is when we talk about responsive websites. That's what we're talking about, how you can look at them on a normal browser screen compared to a phone and tablet, and how they still look good and usable on the screens. What is responsive web design? Responsive web design refers to the websites that are designed to adapt gracefully to screen size, and we'll be doing that in here. Typically, the overall look and feel of a website will remain consistent from one screen size to the next. Use media queries, scalable images, and flexible layouts are the backbone of responsive web designs. Like I said, we'll get into those later on in the course when we get into more of the CSS stuff to get you to have the nice looking responsive web design pages. A lot of places you go nowadays want you to have this knowledge of these responsive web designs because you're doing their website. You never know what kind of instrument they're going to be looking at, whether it be a 900-foot screen or a little flip phone or something like that. You know, you want it to look good on any of those things. So objectives: we loaded a web page into a browser, view the source code of a web page in a browser, describe the components of a web application, describe HTTP requests and responses, distinguish between a way a web page server processes static compared to dynamic, purpose of HTML, purpose of CSS, the purpose of JavaScript, deploy a website, the components of the HTTP URL, discussed these 5 web development issues, and we did all that. So that's pretty much it for that, chapter 1. We don't do much labs or homework for chapter 1. It's just mainly kind of getting you used to this stuff. There is a written test on it. We'll take a break. We'll take like a 15-minute break. We'll go to 11. Well, let's go to 11:30. We'll jump into chapter 2 after that. We'll go to about 11:55 or so. We'll take a lunch break, and then we'll.
Be back around 12:25.
If we're 11:55, you can come back at 12:30. I usually try and get back around 12:30. Sometimes it's 12:35 or so. So
Got it.
but I know the cafeteria is closed and stuff for now, so you may have to eat out of a vending machine or
Nah,
go back to the dorms. You got food in the dorms more than likely.
Nah,